He sat alone at the corner table, patiently waiting. Every staff member walked past, pretending not to see him. No one asked. No one poured water. No one acknowledged him. 40 minutes passed. Only heartbreaking silence remained, until a soldier in uniform walked in, looking at him for a long moment. If this makes your heart ache, subscribe now, because stories like this still happen every day. Thomas Reed was a 42-year-old equipment repair technician with a simple appearance. Thin frame, modest clothes, gentle demeanor. His calloused hands told the story of a lifetime of honest work. That day was his daughter's birthday. He left work early and entered a famous downtown restaurant, planning to reserve a small table as a surprise for her. The elegant establishment stood in stark contrast to his usual diners, but today was special. He arrived 15 minutes early, politely asked for a table near the window, and mentioned he'd wait for his family to arrive. Anticipation brightened his weathered face. The receptionist glanced at him from head to toe and said, "That table is already reserved. You can sit over there for now." Her eyes flickered to his worn jacket before moving to greet the next guest. He nodded without complaint, accepting the table in the corner, partially hidden behind a decorative plant. After 10 minutes, no one had served his table. A couple who arrived after him immediately received water and menus. Their designer clothes seemed to command attention that Thomas's appearance could not. Thomas politely raised his hand to call a server. The young woman only said, "Just a moment," before walking away. That moment stretched into many as she served others with attentive smiles. 20 minutes passed, and still no one asked what he wanted to order. People at nearby tables were already enjoying their main courses. The aroma of expensive cuisine filled the air around him, but not his table. A young manager walked by, looked at Thomas, slightly shook his head, and left. The subtle judgment in that gesture was not lost on Thomas, who had experienced such dismissal before. Thomas wasn't angry. He simply lowered his head, checked his watch, then took a small box from his pocket, a birthday gift he had prepared for his daughter. He had saved for months to afford it. After 40 minutes, he still hadn't been served even a glass of water. His throat was dry, but his dignity remained intact. A diner at the next table turned and asked quietly, "Are you waiting for someone?" Thomas smiled faintly. "I'm waiting for a little respect." The atmosphere in the restaurant continued its elegant hum. Servers moved efficiently between tables. Glasses clinked. Conversations flowed, all around Thomas, but never including him. He sat with perfect posture, hands folded on the table, watching as others were greeted warmly, served promptly, and treated with courtesy. Several diners had noticed his situation by now. An older couple exchanged concerned glances. A businesswoman at the bar frowned slightly while observing the scene, but no one intervened. Thomas took out his phone, checked the time again, and sent a text message. Then he returned to waiting, his calm exterior revealing nothing of his thoughts. The small gift box remained visible on the table, its red ribbon a stark contrast to the white tablecloth. And still, he waited. Another staff member approached, speaking sharply. "If you're not ordering, please vacate this table. We need to serve other customers." Her voice carried just enough volume for nearby diners to hear. Thomas replied politely, "I'm still waiting for my family. I arrived earlier." His voice remained steady, though his fingers tightened around the gift box. "But you didn't book through our app, and you don't look like a regular customer." "I'm sorry." The insinuation was clear. This place wasn't meant for people like him. Thomas nodded and stood up. His movements were dignified. But as he turned to leave, someone in a military uniform walked in from outside. The afternoon light caught on polished metals. It was his father, Colonel Frank Reed, retired after 30 years of service, recently returned from a recovery center. His gait was slow but purposeful. He walked slowly, his eyes scanning the room, then stopping where his son had just been standing. Years of command had taught him to assess situations quickly. "Nobody served you, son?" he asked, his voice deep and measured. The question cut through the ambient chatter. The staff member was still frowning, not yet understanding the situation. She looked between father and son, noting the stark contrast between the decorated soldier and the simple workman. The father didn't say anything more. He took out his phone and dialed a familiar number. His movements were precise, a man accustomed to making consequential decisions. 10 minutes later, a well-dressed man in a suit appeared, the building's owner. He entered with confidence but stopped when he saw the colonel. Frank spoke clearly. "I want to buy this entire building, and I want you all to remember, he's the reason I'm still alive." Each word carried absolute certainty. The entire restaurant froze in shock. Conversations halted mid-sentence. The building owner thought he was joking, but after a few minutes, documents were brought forward. This was no bluff. He had already placed the initial deposit. The paperwork was legitimate. The restaurant manager bowed his head. The server's face turned pale. Thomas stood stunned. "I don't need this." "You need respect," his father replied. The words simple but profound. People nearby had stopped eating, their forks suspended in midair. The restaurant's soft music continued playing, creating an absurd backdrop to the unfolding drama. Frank's military posture hadn't changed, but his presence now filled the room. "My son," Frank continued, "saved 3 men during his civilian contract work overseas. One of them was me after my unit was hit. The military doesn't give medals to civilian contractors, no matter how brave they are." Thomas shook his head, uncomfortable with the attention. "Dad, please." The building owner looked between them, papers still in hand. "Colonel Reed, I had no idea." "No one ever does," Frank replied. "They see what they expect to see." He turned to address the entire restaurant. "My son waited 40 minutes for basic human courtesy. How long would you wait before speaking up?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. Thomas gently touched his father's arm. "Let's just go, Dad. We can celebrate elsewhere." Frank nodded slowly, but before leaving, he placed his business card on the table. "The offer stands. If you've ever been overlooked because of your appearance, type respect to help spread real values." The next day, the restaurant's sign changed. The former managers were transferred. The staff underwent retraining. Frank didn't keep the restaurant for himself. He handed management rights to Thomas. Thomas was surprised, unable to believe his eyes. "I never thought I was capable enough." "You are. You just needed an opportunity," Frank replied. A week later, the restaurant reopened. Local residents came out of curiosity, but stayed out of admiration. The menu was redesigned. One dish was named the Silent Table, the spot where Thomas had sat for 40 minutes without service. A portion of each month's profits was allocated to support veterans and families of low-income workers. The story spread through newspapers and social media, garnering millions of shares. Thomas didn't change. He still dressed simply and personally poured water for guests each morning. Once, a group of young people entered, saw him cleaning a table, and asked, "Are you a new employee?" He just smiled. "I'm the one who was once forgotten here." Later, when they learned the truth, they volunteered to support the restaurant's charity fund. During a small press conference, a reporter asked, "Why didn't you sue or publicly name those who treated you poorly that day?" Thomas answered softly, "I don't want anyone to lose their job. I just want no one to wait 40 minutes to be respected." At that moment, the entire room fell silent. The restaurant quickly became known not just for its food, but for its atmosphere of genuine respect. Every staff member received the same training: see the person, not their appearance. Thomas implemented a unique policy. Any employee who felt another staff member or customer was being disrespectful could ring a special bell. When the bell rang, everyone paused to remember the 40 minutes. One evening, a wealthy businessman arrived wearing designer clothes. He was immediately attended to, offered the best table, given complimentary wine. Across the room sat a school teacher in modest attire, receiving equally attentive service. The businessman noticed this and called Thomas over. "I've heard your story," he said, "but I'm curious, now that you're in charge, aren't you tempted to favor people like me who can spend more?" Thomas smiled gently. "The most expensive thing in this restaurant isn't on the menu." "What's that?" the businessman asked. "The moment when someone feels truly seen," Thomas replied. "That's priceless, and we serve it to everyone." That evening, the businessman left his business card with a note. "Partner with me. Let's open these restaurants nationwide." Thomas placed the card next to the small brass plaque that now adorned his former table. He would consider the offer, but not tonight. Tonight he was having dinner with his father and daughter, at the table where it all began. The restaurant had become a place where everyone was valued equally. Celebrities sat beside construction workers. Executives conversed with janitors. What mattered wasn't the price of your clothes, but the content of your character. Each day, Thomas greeted every guest personally. He remembered names, celebrated birthdays, acknowledged anniversaries. He created a culture where no one felt invisible. In this space, transformed by respect, healing began, not just for Thomas, but for anyone who had ever felt overlooked. The 40-minute wait had become a catalyst for change that rippled far beyond those four walls. Each table in the restaurant told a story of connection. Each meal served came with a side of dignity. Each customer left having experienced something more nourishing than just food. The table where he once sat now bears a small bronze plaque, where a kind man was once forgotten and then remembered by the world. Each month, that table remains empty for one day, as a reminder of the value of silent respect. Frank frequently visits, sitting at that table, watching his son busy in his new role. No need for glory, no need for revenge, just justice restored at the right moment. Thomas's restaurant has become a sanctuary of sorts. Veterans come, knowing they'll be welcomed regardless of their appearance. Families celebrate special occasions, confident that everyone will be treated with equal dignity. The 40-minute wait has become a powerful symbol. Some customers even request to experience it, to better understand what it feels like to be invisible. Thomas gently declines these requests. The lesson, he explains, isn't in feeling invisible. It's in seeing those who already are. 1 year after the incident, Thomas expanded the concept, opening small cafes near veterans' hospitals. Each location employs at least 50% veterans or their family members. Each serves dignity along with their coffee and meals. Some people don't need wealth to deserve respect. They just need not to be forgotten. If you believe kindness should be seen, subscribe to TT Hero Stories. TT Hero Stories, because some heroes never stop serving.